To say that I was known by everyone was not an exaggeration. You know, I'm pretty sure I've said this before, but I could be wrong. But I'm pretty sure. But for a number of years while I was in the Army, I was a counterintelligence agent. Yeah, I know, it sounds fancy or something out of 007, and yeah, sometimes it was pretty exciting, but if you wanted a good description of what we did, it was like working for the Army Criminal Investigation Division, except instead of crimes, we focused on intelligence. So at one point in time, I was in a field office in South Korea, a small town named Tongduchon. If you went to Korea these days, that small town would be a pretty big city. Back then they had a hotel, a couple of Korean restaurants, meaning no fast food, and a plethora of bars and nightclubs that served as hookup spots where young women worked as hostesses and, nightly prostitutes. During this time, one of my strongest talents was liaison work with bar staff, with other ranking soldiers, police officers, and anyone that might serve in some way to help out the counterintelligence community. Every night I would go out and make friends with people who might one day help us out. To say that I was known by everyone was not an exaggeration. For reasons that really had no purpose behind it, I was using the name Anthony Ferguson at the time. It's not like because it's classified or anything like that. I just used it because I thought it was a fun name to use. Everyone knew me. So one day during briefings back at the field office, a small dilemma emerged. The other agents indicated that one thing we didn't have was a map to the city. Up until this time, we dealt with most of our locations in town from memory. We would share those memories with with other agents, and so we kind of knew where things were based off of that. But to be honest, it's a lot easier to handle intelligence in a town when you all have a common frame of reference. Now, I should probably make one thing perfectly clear. This was decades ago. This was a period of time when GPS was still unknown. It hadn't even really been invented yet. I think maybe the Army and the Air Force might have been using a prototype at that time, but it was still really far away. The iPhone was decades away, and Rand McNally wasn't really making maps of Korea or Tongduchon as well. So as a matter of fact, the only official maps were those made by cartographers in the military, which quite often made them classified. And the funny thing about classified stuff in the Army is that very few people have access to classified maps. Even if by the very nature of your job, it was intelligence, you still couldn't get them. So after this little meeting, our senior officer turned to me and says, "Dwayne, I need you to track down one of your friends and see if you can get us a map of Tongduchon." So I went on onto the streets and started going into stores that just might have something like a map. I struck out. No one sold maps because no one ever thought the town needed one. A funny aside, decades later I visited Seoul, South Korea, and wandered into an actual bookstore. They had more maps of the different parts of Korea than I could ever imagine, including Tongduchon. The smartphone I was using at the time had detailed maps of the city. I even scrolled over to where Tongduchon was located. There were excellent maps of that area too, but not back then. So I visited the actual cartographers located in South Korea, and the closest thing I could find was a topographical map that had been created before any of the streets were created in Tongduchon. I'm pretty sure there were classified ones, but we needed something to hang on a wall, not something to hide in a map cabinet or in some classified storage facility. My next attempt was the CID headquarters on Camp Casey, which was the military post closest to Tongduchon. And so I had a liaison with one of the senior agents there, and let's just say we'll call him Bob for lack of any other name. I visited him and told him of the need for a local map. He said he didn't have one, and they were basically having the same problem our local office was having. And he wished me luck trying to find one somewhere else. He mentioned that he and his field office were doing surveillance on some gang activity in the area, and asked me if I wanted to tag along. I'd done quite a few of those because it's always nice to have another set of eyes on a stakeout, and when you bring counterintelligence agents in, It helps CID quite often because we're looking at different things and we might find something that they might have completely missed. The next night, we were sitting in an unmarked car near a nightclub they were staking out. While we were sitting there for hours, Bob suddenly remembered something and he goes, "You know, I think I have seen a map." I was bringing some paperwork to the Korean National Police office in town, and I'm pretty sure I saw a map hanging on their wall. A local map. A few days later, I had Bob introduce me to the field officer of the Korean National Police. It's kind of like the FBI in the States, but newer. And the first thing I noticed when I entered was an actual hand-drawn map on the wall of Tongduchon. The map had locations of every business, both savory and unsavory, for the town. It was exactly what we needed. Bob told them I was looking for a map, and they asked what kind of map. I pointed at their map, and I said, exactly that. The fact that I spoke Korean seemed to ingratiate me towards them almost immediately. The head detective said he would look into it and see if they might have an extra one I could use. So Bob and I left after we made our introductions. 2 days later, the front door of our field office had a knock on the door. One of our agents opened it up to see 3 Korean National Police standing outside. Not used to getting visits from the Korean National Police, they ushered them in, and then the visitors said they were here to visit me. In their hands was the large hand-drawn map from the office. The senior of them said they enjoyed meeting me and wanted to make sure that this map was delivered to me. Everyone in the office just stared at me, wondering how I pulled that off. I said exactly how, and it's one thing I've repeated numerous times before. Make friends with people and you might be surprised at the results. So for years, we had no connection with the Korean National Police until somebody actually went there and talked to them. They were very nice, they were very helpful, and worked with us on many, many a case. So I guess the long case of that is make friends. When you make friends, you get things done. We helped them a lot of times, they helped us a lot of times, and it made things great. As a matter of fact, we never would have had a map until GPS was invented, and that was still a few decades down the line.